everyone. Thanks for having me. This is a talk about where we're headed in the future for Solana. How do we get to decentralized NASDAQ? I guess my official title at Anza, and by the way, Anza, we developed the core protocol. We developed the Agave client, which most of the network runs. So you may have heard of FireDancer. We're the client that's running on mainnet right now, which is Agave. And at Anza, we are the people making IBRL happen. And my job is basically, my title is lead economist, but actually what I do is try to interpret the mysticisms that Anatoly says every day and turn them into tech that we can actually build. So here's one of the mysticisms, which was, what we're working on is we're trying to make order books run on chain. We're trying to build a blockchain that's so fast and cheap that we can outcompete the NASDAQ. And that's pretty hard because NASDAQ is running pretty quickly and with very low costs. So part of that, when we want to say outcompete NASDAQ, we need to be higher bandwidth than NASDAQ. We need more TPS than NASDAQ. So we're targeting 1 million TPS. That's enough TPS to do all of Visa, all of MasterCard, all of Amex and Discover, so all the payment networks, and then all of NASDAQ, all of the CME, the New York Stock Exchange, these exchanges in London and Tokyo. We could put them all on chain with 1 million TPS. And another advantage is if we do 1 million TPS with 0.2 of a cent per transaction, that's 60 billion ARR of revenue. So we're not just talking about that. We actually have at Anza, and we're working very closely with FireDancer on this, we're targeting a doubling of CU limit by the end of the year. And we've already had SIMD 207, which was, as Anatoly put it, a CU increase for insects, which was just to test that none of these hard-coded parameters were in there. Now we have 256, which is the last in the queue right now of feature flags for Agave 2.2, which will increase 20% up to 60 million CU. And we have a hard commit that we're really trying to get to 100 million CU in Agave by the end of the year. So another thing that we need to get is we need to get the block time down, okay? Bitcoin started out with 10 minutes expected block time. Ethereum's at 12 seconds now. They've said, in 5 years, they're gonna ship a 4-second block time with the Beam chain. Today, we're at 400 milliseconds. In the future, we wanna get to 20 milliseconds. So how does that look? Because the round trip time from New York City to Tokyo is actually more than 20 milliseconds. It's around 200 milliseconds right now. And so it's pretty hard to think about doing consensus at a faster than light speed if we have a global network. But it turns out, just like everything else in the Solana protocol, consensus can be pipelined. And so we can actually operate many different block consensus at the same time. So we can, if we say have 20 millisecond blocks and it takes 300 milliseconds to do consensus on each one of them, we can stagger those out by 20 milliseconds. We can have 15 blocks having consensus on them at the same time. And that way we can get the tick rate of the exchange on chain down to 20 milliseconds. And I think this will probably cause a lot of outrage on Twitter that I'm talking about this, because there's some so-called experts who say, you need a few rounds, you need communication. No, you don't need that. You can get the tick rate down. The confirmation time will still be gated by the speed of light, of course. But with pipelining, which is what we use in a ton of other areas of the protocol, we can just bring that to consensus, and then we can bring the block time down to 20 milliseconds. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is really what I've been working on most, which is how do we get order books that are competitive with NASDAQ on chain? Here's an order book. You can see the cumulative bids in green, the cumulative asks in red, and then this little area, oh, my laser pointer is not working very well, but this little area in the middle is the spread. And we care a lot about the spread because that's what tells us how we're doing and competing with NASDAQ. We need to offer better prices than NASDAQ if we want people to choose to trade on chain. So what determines the spread? On the left side of this equation is a term that tells you how many retail traders, uninformed traders who have an urgent, inelastic need to trade are coming in. And we make a little bit of money on those guys. There's a saying that market makers, they make pennies and they lose dollars. The right side is the losing dollars. This is what happens when an event happens, the president tweets, and all of a sudden you need to re-underwrite your price, and Jane Street sees that the price has moved faster than you, and they trade against you, and they make money off you. So there are two ways we can reduce the spread. Either we can increase the number of retail users on the left side, or we can do something to protect the market makers from toxic flow and more informed flow than them. And I would say the super team's job is on the left side. My job is maybe fix the right side, and together we will kind of make this good flywheel, because one of the other things that affects Lambda Invest, which is how many uninformed traders there are, is how low the spread is. So it's kind of circular. The more we get the spread down, the more retail users we have, the more the spread comes down. So when we look at the price process and how this game works out, there are kind of two types of volatility in prices. There's diffusive volatility, which you can think of as the slow kind of volatility. The uncertainty is still there, but it moves slowly enough that the bid-ask spread is still containing the mid-price. And the jump volatility is like really fast and sudden movements. And so these are from the same day on Binance. This is from 12:30. This was from midnight. You can see that on the left side, you're kind of within the bid-ask spread the entire time as the market maker. All you're doing is picking up pennies from retail traders. On the right side, there's this huge jump that happened, and a bunch of levels, so a bunch of ticks got picked off here. About a 30 basis point, which is 0.30% move. And you can see that this whole area shaded in red represents a potential loss for the market maker. This is why we say they pick up pennies and lose dollars, because this is basically 30 or 60 times more losses than they make on any individual retail trade. So they need like 60 times the retail volume to make up for this potential loss here. On centralized exchanges, when a jump like this happens, the market maker gets to successfully cancel, which means they don't have that loss about 13% of the time. And there's this massive like race that starts to happen. So whenever the jump happens, the maker and the takers all race to get to the exchange first. The takers want to take the stale liquidity. The maker wants to cancel. And it turns out on centralized exchanges, there's like about 10 firms. And so it's you kind of win about 10% of the time as a canceller. But on Solana, it looks very different to that. And unfortunately, it's not the ideal market structure for tight spreads on chain. So on Solana, we have Geo, or we have some buffer period, where within that buffer period, the person who pays the most in an auction is the person who gets to snipe the stale quote or cancel it. And what that means is it's almost as if we give the takers a head start, because even when the maker cancels successfully, they have to pay a high bid to do that. And this is not ideal. It means that they're still losing the money. Even though they successfully canceled, they ended up paying $6 to the validator here to do that successful cancel, and that's basically the same as getting picked off. So what do we do about this? Well, we have this idea called application-specific sequencing, and I originally called this execution flags, and then somebody on Twitter was like, let's call it app-specific sequencing, which is conveniently has an acronym ASS, so they like that a lot. But the basic idea is let's let the drifts and the phoenixes and the serums and all the order books on chain, let's let them take control over their own ordering. And in doing so, they can prioritize cancels. So they can increase the probability that a market maker successfully cancels their order. And that should tighten the spread. So why can't we do that today? We could just enforce that in replay. Unfortunately, because the leader is a monopolist in their leader window, that leader can just ignore all of the cancel orders. And so even though we're prioritizing cancel orders, from the perspective of the protocol, the leader never includes the cancel and so we never see the cancel, and so we cannot prioritize it. So alone, application-specific sequencing, although it seems promising, does not solve tighter spreads because of this censorship issue. But one of the things that we could do about that is we could make more than one way to get onto the chain. So the defense against censorship is to have multiple leaders within the same slot who can propose blocks. In this case, the maker submits to 3 leaders, one of them censors him, the other 2 don't censor him, and so he makes it in. And then we prioritize the cancel, and he gets to cancel his stale order and doesn't lose all that money. So how do we actually go about making a multiple proposer world happen? What is the actual tech behind it? The first question that I often get when I talk about this is, how do we merge multiple blocks together? So say we have 3 blocks, one from proposer 1, one from proposer 2, one from proposer 3. Well, the simplest rule we could do, we just take the union of all the transactions, deduplicate them, and then we order them by priority fee and we execute them. And it turns out that this actually works really, really well because you can combine it with the ability to read the priority fee. So we're going to add a syscall, which is going to be syscall read transaction metadata, and that will allow you to read the priority fee. And then you can execute conditional logic based on that. So if you're a exchange and you want to, say, prioritize cancels over takes, you could say cancels are allowed to set whatever priority fee they want, but the takes, they can't set more than 100 LAMP ports. Okay. That's kind of what's depicted on the right here. And so we don't need a really complicated version of application-specific sequencing. We can just order things by priority fee, let the apps read it, and then they can decide how they want to sequence their transactions. Okay, and now onto the consensus side, which is the harder part, I guess. Here's a little review. This is my favorite part of the Solana protocol. It's Turbine. It's how we broadcast blocks to the entire validator set so that they can be voted on. We take the block, we shred it into an erasure set, so we erasure code it, and that produces some redundancy. We send those to some validators who are chosen, who are called relays, and those relays spray it to everybody in the validator set. So this gives me a little bit of inspiration on how can we do a good version of this for multi-leader. So we're going to start off with 3 leaders here. Each of them creates a block and shreds it. We choose relays, and then we use shared randomness so that the first shred from each guy goes to the first relay. Okay. So then the relays tell a single consensus leader which shreds they have. So you would say, I have the second shred from leader 1, the second shred from leader 2, and the second shred from leader 3. The consensus leader then packs a block with these I have messages. Up until this point, no information about the block is revealed, only information that lets you know that the block is available in the network. Okay, after he packs the block, he sends it to the validators. We have a standard round of consensus. And once consensus has been achieved, we look at the packed block. We say, which blocks are sufficiently available in the network, so have sufficiently high number of shreds in the I have messages in the packed block, and we can release all of the information about the block. So what this does is it keeps the information about what's in the block private until after consensus has been reached. There's no opportunity to say, build your block to sandwich transactions in another leader's block. That can't happen here, and we can prove that it can happen, actually. So that's a property we call simultaneous release or binding simultaneous release. And it's super important for auctions, and it's also super important for preventing sandwiching. So we were working for a while on getting a scheme that works for it, and this is that scheme. This is my last slide. So just to conclude, the 3 things we need to compete with NASDAQ are way more bandwidth, 1 million TPS. We need to get latency down, tick rate down to 20 milliseconds, and we need multiple leaders for the market structure. If we have all those three things, I can see a world where we're competing or even doing better on spreads than Binance and NASDAQ and New York Stock Exchange, which was the original vision of Solana. That's my time.